Before we begin with our series of interviews and Q&A from students that are interested in the construct of growth mindset versus fixed thinking, let me set the stage for what we're going to do. There will be a series of videos of students asking particular questions after they've completed a lesson on Carl Jung's theory of personality, Piaget's theory of childhood development, and how is it that we develop fixed archetypes. The fixed archetype is how we leave childhood in a fixed pattern of thought, a fixed personality that may be difficult to break from the realistic notion of societal protection, ethnicity protection, intergenerational transmission of culture, which is important, which is the underlying framework of our fixed pattern of thinking and our unconscious mind. And it's always questioned about whether this is biological, psychological, or social. And we're not going to spend time on the percentage mixes of that, because what we know is everything starts with biology and then is enhanced exponentially by the environment and our social experiences and the understandings we derive from those experiences and the relationships that we had along the way. So Layla asked the first question about false growth mindset. We're going to start there.
So my question is, what factors into developing a negative or a fixed mindset or like a false growth mindset? I know the difference between a false growth mindset and a fixed mindset, but is there something that can happen that causes the false growth mindset that maybe would not cause the fixed mindset? Are they two completely different things, or is it kind of the same thing? I know the video kind of touched on that, but I'm curious about understanding like what causes things like that to develop. Like, is it outside influence? Is it inside influence? I'm curious. So, thank you.
Good question, Layla. Thank you so much for starting us off today. The whole interoperability between fixed pattern thinking and growth mindset almost becomes an invalidation, like, well, just stop worrying. Well, just develop a growth mindset and you'll be able to get beyond what you're stuck with. Not that easy, and requires mindfulness and thoughtfulness. Or, as Layla indicates, the potential for false growth mindset can ensue. And what is false growth mindset is not actually a psychological construct that is defined by a theory. It's not defined by a theorist. It is simply the idea that rather than the person who is the influencer focusing on allowing some of the influencer, could be a parent, it could be a broader set of social interactions from extended Bronfenbrenner circles, could be a school teacher, very well, could be a teacher or a professor, and how they influence the person to think. Are we influencing people on how to think, to use their autonomy, agency, and purpose in life to come to their own answers, or are we telling them how to think? And so often we get trapped into the idea of teaching people what to think versus how to think. And there's a lot of complexity involved. When we're talking about a child, it depends on the operational stage from a Piagetian perspective. In the sensory motor stage, that child only has the ability to generate neurological synapses in the first couple of years. And so the influencer, which is the primary caregiver, needs to stay focused on objects and relationships. The rest is lost in the flurry of neurological development, which is just designed to allow a person to build a relationship with the primary caregiver that allows them to explore objects and understand how to interact with the outside world. Beyond age 2, in the pre-operational stage, we're talking about language and symbols. So, if the primary caregiver rewards the idea of enunciating a sound that's viable within the developmental stage between age 2 and age 7, or in interacting with an object, a ball, a bat, other objects. Whereas the difference is in the concrete operational stage, we're learning rules and how to interact with other people, the ability to understand the rules of a baseball game and how other people are playing in context with those rules, and then develop a moral and an ethical and a procedural idea of how one is going to apply their own understanding to the application of the game, and then of course the frustration with other people on the interactions. That said, false growth mindset comes from rewarding the effort rather than the process. Rewarding the effort or rewarding the outcome even, meaning win or lose. Do I only get love from my parents if I hit a home run in the baseball game? Or do I only get love from my parents about how fast I ran or how much effort I put in? Either one of those can develop false growth mindset, rather than what was the experience and what did you learn from it. I'm going to read Kiera's question. Hi, Dr. Smart. After watching the TED Talk on grit and the video, The Power of Yet, I've been thinking a lot about how fixed mindsets often come from a place of protection, like avoiding failure or embarrassment. My question is, how can we realistically shift from the protection of fixed mindset to a productive growth mindset without feeling like we are risking too much emotionally or mentally? Good question, Kiera. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, in which the lowest level of expression is tied to our food and water, then our shelter, then the quality of our relationships, and then the self-efficacy of our accomplishments, and then our actualization of understandings, is a true prerequisite pyramid. If all of a sudden, in the midst of development, one falls back to a shortcoming in food and water, one falls back to then surviving the lowest level of the pyramid until we rebuild it back to food, water, shelter is good, and then a set of supportive, encouraging, and validating relationships before we can move on to setting goals and self-determination. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a risk model. We all experience different levels of risk in life. And to the extent that we understand where we are, we can adjust and modify our actions to support our needs. For instance, it is futile if one is failing to achieve food, water, and shelter to be working on growth mindset. At that stage, we need to stabilize our safety and security. We need to rebuild our relationships, and then focus back on our long-term goals. So this is a risk-reward model. We all go through various stages of it. Sure, it'd be ideal if everybody did not have to struggle ever for food, water, and shelter. Maybe not realistic, but if we understand the model, we can understand what's occurring, the influence, where we are, when we have setbacks, what we need to do to rebuild. I'm now going to read Turner's question. After watching Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, and The Power of Yet, I have a couple of questions. How do we recognize when our fixed thinking is actually protecting us, like keeping us from wasting energy on something unrealistic, when it's holding us back from growth that we need? Also, do we think there are times when too much grit could be unhealthy, like when we keep pushing on something that's no longer good for us? I'd love to hear your thoughts. In our study of Ayn Rand's Theory of Objectivism, what Ayn Rand told us is that objectivism means that our self-interest is not selfishness. Selfishness is destructive to creating a win-win between us and others. Self-interest is how we define the actions that we take in order to respond to our fixed thinking. After childhood, defined by our archetype. Our childhood builds us into one of Carl Jung's archetypal categories. Now, categorizing people that are absolute individuals is valuable, and invaluable in us understanding who we are and how we can interact with others in a high efficacy way. It also comes with the risk of invalidating the individual when we try to tie that individual to a new group, which has its own connotations. So we do not lose the idea that everyone is an individual. Everyone is very individual. Identical twins are very different from one another, as we have learned. Fixed pattern of thinking is the standard. And although the lessons all talk about the idea of grit and perseverance, the reason we need to use grit or perseverance is very hard to break from fixed patterns of thinking that are designed to protect us, that are designed to protect our culture, that are designed to allow the ethnicity and our standard of functioning within our society to continue. So, largely, we are going to be in a mode of reacting behaviorally through the understandings that were derived from our experiences during childhood in the various stages of development. From there, depending on the stability of our relationships and how we keep those relationships either built, rebuilt, or improved over time, if we study Bronfenbrenner seriously, then we can analyze in a mindful way those arenas of fixed thinking that are helping us. I always like to use a driving analogy. When we are driving our car, we learned how to drive the car. When we first drove the car, we had to figure out, well, do I turn the steering wheel an inch or two, or do I turn it a quarter of an inch? And our neurological system developed a whole set of synapses around driving a car. And we don't think about, well, I need to turn the steering wheel a quarter of an inch and press the gas pedal down 3/8. It's very helpful. Without that, we would not be able to survive in traffic. That fixed thinking is exemplative of more complex things. And if you can imagine, driving is complex, but there are far more complex things, like interacting with others, work, interpersonal relationships, relationships with family, friends. How do I react to influences that I may be dependent upon from a relationship perspective, but not always agree with and want to grow beyond? Very complex thinking that requires a mindful approach in order to ensure that we're continually supporting moving forward along Maslow's pyramid and not regressing, although regression is inevitable. Let me use another analogy. If all of a sudden we decided that experientially it would be a good idea to take on hiking, get out in the wilderness, get away from the city, learn a new skill, so that I'm staying fit, I'm experiencing the world from more than the concrete jungle, and in doing so, all new experiences, new skills that need to be learned. Well, this is going to require a growth mindset to even just get started, to understand what do I need to do functionally for this new experience to take place. And then if I decide that this new experience is supportive, well, then I have choices of different groups that I could go with, and those groups might have different levels of support and different people that I might want to go hiking with. Whether I join a club and do this formally, or whether I'm just encouraging friend groups that I already have. All these complexities take time, maybe years, in order to develop into new, meaningful experiences that lead to based upon supportive relationships, new understandings which allow one to grow. So I may have grown up in Detroit. I may have lived all my life in the concrete jungle because that was my fixed pattern of comfortability. And I realized at some point that doesn't serve me. So I need to break from that. I have to learn a whole new set of skills. I have to get comfortable with it. I have to interact with new sets of people. And if those new sets of people are not strongly supportive and encouraging and validating to my new experience in the way, for instance, I join a group and the group is too highly skilled at this, and they invalidate my newness to this versus supporting me as I grow into it. Well, I could fall down on the Maslow pyramid and as such now be unable to function in the new realm that I need to, and I have to decide, is it just not for me? Or do I need to, if it is for me and it's useful and it is where I want to grow into, then I need to do it in context with what do I need relative to relationships.
Hi, I have some questions about the lesson on fixed thinking versus a growth mindset. How can we learn to stop trying to fit in and align internally to deepen our growth mindset? How can we teach resilience and grit to young people? How can we change the school system so that children can be raised with the growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset? How can we recognize our fixed mindset triggers? And finally, when does fixed thinking develop?
Hi, Carol. 4 good questions there about fixed mindset triggers, fitting in, resilience and grit, and the Bronfenbrenner School, which is academia. So the notionality of fitting in has to do with our Maslow need for relationships. So we're always tempted to negotiate our fit within our social circles that we deem supportive. And hence, when you did the Bronfenbrenner exercise, you rated your social circles. Because if a social circle needs to be enhanced, we don't need to ghost it. We don't need to make abrupt, risky moves of abandoning social circles that we've been used to and people that we have that have contributed to our development for many years. But we may need to build new circles or enhance our existing ones to higher levels of efficacy in order to be able to move up the pyramid and learn new skills. So back to my idea of I want to go to Big Bend Park, I want to go hiking, or I want to do equestrian. That's never been part of my thing because I lived in the concrete jungle, but I know I need this because I'm just over anxious or too unable to think in a broader sense about the problems that I'm trying to incorporate into my purpose because I have too narrow of an experience in life. I've never experienced getting out of my current geography. So I would say that the idea of fitting in and not fitting in has to do with one needs, if one is going to continue to function within the social circle, which is maybe one's church. Well, that's the superego. The superego is going to put pressure on the id for us to comply in order to be part of that church. Sure, you could move around and change churches with different doctrines and different people, but at some sense, you're going to compromise at some point to be part of that circle. And if that circle isn't fully helping one accomplish their need for certain experiences, then we would need to get those experiences outside of the church framework. So we can only fit into a circle within that circle's level of willingness to allow it. And in that case, we need to build a new circle for our new experiences and understandings. Teaching grit and resilience is an important lesson, and that's why Dr. Duckworth and Dr. Dweck are spending so much time talking about growth mindset. But it's important for us, and this is the purpose of what our discussion is, to know that fixed action thinking is the human condition. And that fixed action thinking is important, is valid, it's purposive. And we cannot dispense with it. We have to methodically create a understanding, as Carl Jung would say, of who is it intrinsically that we are. We have to understand our subconscious. Our unconscious mind has to be uncovered. Do we need to expose our unconscious mind to detractors and invalidators? No. The purpose isn't to change other people. That's impossibility. That cannot happen any more than other people can change us. The only thing that happens is that we end up complying and fitting in and not experiencing what's necessary for our purpose. But we do need to figure out where do we apply grit and resilience. And as we said, the Maslow pyramid is a risk model. That means we need to apply our grit and resilience to arenas that are valuable to move us up the pyramid, not move us down the pyramid. So if one comes to the conclusion, I'm not saying that this is the case, but if one comes to the conclusion that a particularly familial or personal circle is only rated a 3 at best in support, then versus trying to change the people in that circle, which is an impossibility, we need to build a new circle that gives us the support so that we can do, for example, equestrian or hiking or whatever else we need to do in order to experience the expansive growth that we need in life. So it's not about teaching resilience and grit as much as is teaching about introspection and following Carl Jung's theory of personality, in which we need to understand who we are intrinsically so that we can make those adjustments in our Bronfenbrenner circle that allow us to grow up the Maslow pyramid. And the school system is one of those circles. And you do have choices of colleges. Some might be more supportive in some areas than others. Colleges have certain areas of expertise. Texas A&M is known as a science and engineering school. University of North Texas is known as a social sciences school. And so there are varieties of expansive knowledge pools that each of these schools specialize in. But the core is actually, does the school teach us how to think within that arena, or does it only teach us what to think? So Piaget taught us that in development of cognitive capabilities, fixed constructs in which the only way to learn those fixed constructs is to memorize or practice a routine like math. For that to become formal learning, a person needs to learn that just like they would a language, embedded in life as a practical application. So certainly a math teacher is tasked with teaching a left brain activity, which is a formulaic equation, but that formulaic equation, for it to actually be practical, needs to be applied to a construct in which the individual, whether it's a child or not, is actually being taught not what to think, formula 2 times 4 in parentheses plus 12 equals, but how does that apply to a function of life in which it can be useful? So even in fixed constructs, Piaget implied that we still cannot be telling people what to think, but instead how to think, so that we achieve the theory of objectivism that Ayn Rand talked about. Autonomy, agency produces a better result than groupthink. Always produces a far better result than groupthink.
Hello, Dr. Smart. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. I have a couple questions for you. So why is fixed thinking difficult to overcome, and how should we overcome it? Should we always seek to overcome our fixed actions, patterns of thoughts? And when is fixed thinking valuable? Thank you so much, and looking forward to hearing your answers.
Good day, Emily. Good question. Fixed patterns of thinking are difficult to overcome because they're important for us. Again, just looking at the driving construct, if we had to think about every activity that is necessary for us to drive our car, we would not be able to do it. We would not be able to effectively automate what's necessary to get through traffic. It would be impossible. And there would be a lot of chaos because there would not be a collective ability for all of us to interoperate together in effective ways in the same traffic patterns. Same way with cultures, ethnicity, families, even in churches, schools, and in groups. There needs to be a level of reliable coalescence in which we have certain amount of fixed patterns of like-mindedness in order for these functions to actually work. That said, those things are very limiting, because the limitation would create a lack of purpose in life. We would not have any purpose to the individual if all the individual did was comply with the edicts of the superego. So it is a difficult construct, and that construct must be mitigated by an understanding of oneself, and which the fixed patterns are valuable, which ones are, and which ones, probably a lesser extent, I need to put a conscious effort into breaking from in order to accomplish the intrinsic subconscious purpose of my life.
I just have 6 questions. 3 are from the video Grit, and 3 are from the video The Power of Yet. The 3 questions from the Power of Yet video is, can a growth mindset be culturally influenced or limited by socio-economical factors? How might law schools or legal education benefit from integrating growth mindset principles? And the last question for that video is, how does the concept of yet apply to adult learners or professional development? The next video, Grit, 3 questions I have for that is, can institutions like schools or workplaces design environments that foster grit? How does grit compare to other psychological traits like resilience or consciousness? And the last question is, how might grit influence success in law school or legal career specifically?
Hi, Travian. Thanks for your question. So the idea of grit, ethnicity, and social factors and how that plays out in relation to your goal of going to law school is something for you to certainly ponder. In our next week's exercise, where we're going to go deep into Carl Jung's theory of personality, we're going to actually look at the archetypal testing and try to determine do you have the right mix of conventional mindset and creativity that's necessary in order to be a lawyer. That said, what we know is that our grit opposes our fixed action pattern thinking. The fixed action pattern thinking allows us to create our social circles, which allow us to function, and at the same time limit us from being able to express our intrinsic purpose. Can we break down all of those intrinsic self-worth ideals and just live in compliance with our social influences? Sure, but that defeats our purpose in life. So the question for you becomes, if your entire family were all lawyers and you've grown up in that, you're probably going to gravitate towards it because that is built into your fixed thinking. And you also feel like you have an easy path to success because you're already indoctrinated into the culture of being a lawyer by just being around it. At the same time, you do need to analyze whether or not that is fitting with your underlying purpose. From my perspective, I grew up in a family of automotive workers, and it was very hard to break from that mindset because they all thought that I was going to drop out of high school on the 10th grade and work in an automotive factory, and it's a good thing that I did break from it, and I had a certain level of forethought to realize that somebody was going to come along and outsource all the automotive manufacturing to out of Detroit, and I would be left with not able to actually function within that social framework because it doesn't exist anymore. It's been abandoned. So not to give myself extra credit, but good fortune.
Hello, Dr. Smart. The question I'm about to ask might have already been answered, but I just watched 3 videos, so forgive me. In terms of fixed mindset, what is the best way to counteract that when you're a child? Because from what I was listening to, a lot of that develops when you're a child based on the way your parents, teachers, adults around you act, say things, so on and so forth. That's the only question I have. Thank you for listening. I look forward to your input.
Hi, Maddox. Good question. No need to challenge what is working. If our fixed patterns are serving us effectively and we're getting through traffic and in coordination with other people, and traffic is difficult, and it's working for us, there's no need to change it. And if we need to enhance our skills, for instance, we want to save gas mileage so we get a motorcycle, then we would get additional training in order to be safe and know when it's possible to ride a motorcycle depending on weather, etc., and save gas, be effective, and stay safe when we need new skills. Or we enter a new geographic area because we need to take classes at the Farmersville campus versus the Wiley campus. And as such, then we need to drive on rural roads versus on interstate tollways, different skill set affected by weather in different ways. Then we would develop new skills, but no need to challenge what is working as long as it's moving us forward on the Maslow pyramid, and then make intrinsic change on those things that we can leverage against our needs model. Our needs model moves us forward. Our risk model is to avoid moving downwards. Can't always do it. There is no way to avoid risk in life, but it is always the case that growth comes from new experiences. So we need to find where new experiences need to be applied to our life in order to gain those new understandings. Absent of Carl Jung says, absent of randomizing the process, everything absolutely stays the same. Every entity, for instance, every business, will continue to operate with the same type of employees, hiring the same archetypal employee personalities until they either realize intrinsically that they need to change or fail. Hence, what Ayn Rand says, the normal business cycle. Nothing wrong with a business going into bankruptcy and going out of business. The government should not save them. They shouldn't petition the government to be saved. That's a normal business cycle that randomizes and allows new entrants into the marketplace. Now, this is not a business class, but the fact is that in your life, absent of an intentional randomization of your experiences, you will live your life the way those experiences likely unfolded, with the same type of relationships that you experienced in childhood during your developmental phase, absent of an intentional randomization by oneself. So that intentional randomization could be in experiences. It also could be in relationships. And again, I'm not suggesting that you ghost all your prior relationships, because we all need a supportive circle. You need to rate those relationships, and you need to figure out where it is that we need to enhance our relationship quality, either in support, validation, or encouragement, either with new groups in our Bronfenbrenner circle, or adding new people to our existing groups, at church, mixing with a different group, at school, mixing with a different group, or changing schools, changing churches. These are all decisions that have to be made in order to randomize our relationships, randomize our experiences, Maddox, in order to affect the intrinsic change that we need in order to move up the Maslow pyramid into greater levels of autonomy, agency, and self-determination, without moving downward by blowing up our fixed thinking that has created food, water, shelter, safety, and security, and allowed us to get where we are.
Hi, Dr. Smart. I've learned that a growth mindset encourages us to embrace challenges and learn from our failures in our lives, and a fixed mindset can help make people avoid risks out of fear of looking incapable. But my question is about these TED Talks is, how can someone with a fixed mindset begin to truly shift their thinking in situations when it comes to real life, and especially if they've had years of history with self-doubt and self-expression? And are there any specific daily habits or thought patterns that help rewire that mindset over time?
Hi, Marla. Thanks for your question. I like your choice of words about rewiring, because that is, in effect, what is necessary in order to develop growth mindset. Now, our subject primarily is what is the value of fixed pattern thinking, because Dr. Duckworth, Dr. Dweck spent a lot of time talking about the only way that we achieve actualization is breaking from our fixed pattern thinking. But it is important to understand that what they're saying is to not necessarily is to be discerning. Carl Jung told us that we need to discern where it is that we need to rewire, because our fixed patterns of driving do not need to be blown up in order for us to get a more meaningful experience in our personal life associated with our physical activity. Okay, so driving a car is not a physical activity, it's a transportation mode that gets us from place to place. We do not need to blow up everything that we learned about driving a car in order to create a new experience that allows us to expand out of the city into the rural, contemplative, slower mode of being able to understand our intrinsic self. As an example, these are just examples. Everyone needs these, this contemplation in their own lives, and to be creative and brainstorming about not only where do I have fixed patterns that are not serving me? This is what we're looking at. When do the fixed patterns keep me from growing up the Maslow pyramid? And where would blowing them up cause me to move downward on the Maslow pyramid? And is making the change actually necessary for the goal that I am trying to accomplish? So rewiring is the right word, because it takes many, many experiences. Think about all the Piagetian phases of childhood development. Everything it took to get a fixed pattern thinking. It took hundreds, if not thousands, of experiences that created the neurological framework that causes us to act in fixed ways. It takes equal amount to add to that a new set of experiences and multiple sub-experiences within that experience in order to create a new understanding and possibly add new relationships. So the notion of being focused on a specific arena and understanding intrinsically who we are, possibly with the personality testing that we're going to be doing next week, but definitely understanding from a category perspective, what is our archetype? And within that archetype, what are the things that we could do to enhance our experience and our meaning in our lives to accomplish our purpose, to be focused on one particular arena of self-determination that isn't serving us any longer.
Hi, Dr. Smart. After watching Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, and The Power of Yet, I have a few questions. First, how do we tell the difference between healthy perseverance and pushing ourselves to the point of burnout? When is grit helping us grow, and when is it holding us back? Second, how can we build a growth mindset when we've grown up around people with fixed mindsets, like parents or teachers who focus only on success and not the effort we put into it? And finally, how do we know when fixed thinking is protecting us? For example, helping us avoid failure, and when it's just holding us back from growing?
Hi, Olamide. Good question. Thank you for it. Yeah, no easy answer, though. The idea of fixed patterns and what serves us and what does not is an introspection that each of us have to do. It's a contemplation that needs to be really purposes in our lives. We need to be doing this on a regular, we need to get in the practice of a purposive introspection of who we are and how our fixed action patterns are serving us or not. how our relationships are serving us or not, and what new experiences we need to add in order to enhance our existing set of experiences and the neurological development that created them. It is an ongoing effort that avoids being stuck in a repetitive pattern of just repeating intergenerational, what Jean-Paul Sartre would call objectifying, meaning just becoming something for someone else. Now, I'm not saying that our parents' job was to protect us. So our parents' job was to protect us, protect the culture, to pass down what they know. There's no Ph.D. in growth mindset that parents are required to attain. So the parents aren't responsible for, although, it would be valuable if parents would know that at the Piaget stage of post-operative development, that autonomy and agency is absolutely necessary and essentially important, and they would encourage that. It would make life easier, but it isn't their responsibility as each of us to understand our underlying archetype and how that archetype was created, and in areas of which is it in alignment with our desire in life and when it is not. And when it is not, there is a normal function called anxiety that tells us we're not going to perform. We're not moving forward, we're moving backward, and it's out of alignment with our purpose. And excessive anxiety is massively detrimental to performance. So that anxiety is an excellent indicator that burnout could occur, and to react to it in understandable ways. Now, certainly, if you've never gone on a hike in the woods, and you're experiencing something new, there may be inducing of anxiety. But at the point where that anxiety is limiting is where it's too much and could lead to what you call burnout, and it could move further into emotional disconnection or a disability. So, a person that identifies in a certain way but is conscribed to by the superego, the society, to be someone entirely different than who they are is a lot of work. It's a lot of work to mask and keep track of who everyone wants me to be versus who I actually am. And that's what induces anxiety, could lead to disability and burnout. Hi, Liam. I'm going to read your comments. Hello, I have just a few questions on growth mindset and fixed thinking. Is a growth mindset something you are born with, or is it something that is learned and taught as you go through life? If growth mindset difficult to achieve, is it time consuming? What makes fixed thinking difficult to overcome? Is fixed thinking bad, or does it have its uses? What skills are needed to be in a growth mindset? Well, Liam, biosocial cycle protections are learned in childhood when neurological development is rapid. So hence why in earlier days, in the Darwin theory of evolution, we thought these things were all genetic and they were passed down intergenerationally. Wow, you're just like your grandparents. You have green eyes, but you also move your hand exactly the way your grandfather did. Well, the green eyes were biological. The way you move your hand was the copying of other people's influence on one's development. And so the whole notion of a primary caregiver up to age 2, and then in a small expansive circle up to age 4 to 7, is creating, all while there's massive neurological development going on, is creating your fixed pattern of thinking. After age 7 to 11, there's more thinking that is experiential in nature, because maybe we're expanding our groups, friend groups, baseball teams, other communities in which those influences help us create fixed thinking. And then after age 11, on the post-operational stages of Piaget's development, then we introduce autonomy and agency. And after all that fixed thinking is developed, that's when our parents really start to get fearful. Oh no, the child is expecting to be their own person, to be autonomous, to be agent, to be their own agent, to question. Well, then the child learns not to question because the parents' reaction to it. But in adolescent development, that is the agency and the autonomy that is intended to be developed in. So these protections are designed so that when a person is not capable of making a safe decision otherwise, like if you're 1 and you can't feed yourself, or make the decision to find the water faucet, or even know what a water faucet is, or that that's an object and not a person, that we survive as a species, and that the culture is passed down by having small circles, which are generally our ethnicities, our cultures, our families, until the neurological development grows larger and larger, and we're capable and able to be able to then, in the adolescent mode, be autonomous and question other people without the fear of retaliation, or know what style the retaliation is coming at in order to avoid it, until we can support that circle in deeper ways later on.
Hi, Dr. Smart. I have a couple questions after watching the TED Talk and stuff, and I was just wondering how having a fixed mindset or growth mindset really affect you on your day-to-day life. And say, for instance, you have a growth mindset about one specific topic, and how does that affect that topic? And then one that you have a fixed mindset on, something that you should really think you could improve on, or that you don't want to improve on, and that you like that it's fixed that way. So I was just wondering how you feel about that in your day-to-day life. And so do you think that it's okay to have both, or do you think one, if you have both, it's wrong and you should only have one growth mindset and you should only have one fixed mindset? Do you think they're variables? Thank you.
Hi, Nolan. Thanks so much for your question. Good place for us to finish today. You ask about growth mindset in my life, and I've mentioned maybe in class that I grew up in Detroit, that my parents and grandparents worked in steel factories. My grandparents were immigrants during World War II, in which they stowed away on a ship, went to Ellis Island, got asylum, escaping Mussolini, and in doing so, they lived in Detroit, working in a factory, and I assume that they intended that ultimately that was the place to be, and it worked for them. They were successful at accomplishing their life goals through, obviously, my grandparents had a growth mindset at 13, if you were willing to jump on a ship. Now, of course, that growth mindset was incentivized by the construct of fascism, and you could, if you don't comply with the constructs of the social and political constructs of fascism, then then you were not valuable to society and could experience extreme risk under that regime. So again, they made the decision based on their risk model that they would stow away 13 years old in a ship, 3-month trip, seek asylum, end up in Detroit working in a steel mill, did well. My parents did the same thing, but somehow or another, the social influence, at 17, that I was not going to necessarily benefactor from that same. How I came to that, I'm absolutely not certain. where the introspection came from, but I did decide that that did not have a percentage chance of maintaining safety, security, and comfort, food, water, and shelter for me. And it turned out that that gamble was correct. And, you know, the people living in Detroit right now now have another 6 generations of people that have been out of work since they moved those factories to other countries. So the end state of my growth mindset was the need to get an academic influence into my life that I didn't know I needed, because I moved into restaurants and retail first. I took a hiatus from going to college after I graduated high school. So I didn't know my path was academic initially, but various things seem to not be allowing me to move forward on the Maslow pyramid, self-actualize, to attain my goals, and over time I came to the conclusion, 10 years, that I needed to get a degree, and then academics over time would be my life, given that I have 3 master's degrees now. I worked in business for a number of decades. I worked in business healthcare for a decade, in psychological, and then got a Ph.D. in psychology. All a long journey that was, I wish I could say, fully conscious and mindful, because, of course, as a psychologist, it's easier for me to explain to you what's needed in order to maximize your potential, given my understanding of these psychological constructs, than it was for me to actually do without this capacity. And the reality is, in modern society, there's nothing you can do with a 10th grade education. There's very little you can do with a high school education. And even a bachelor's degree is not a specialized degree. It's a generalist degree. And then many people, a high percentage, will have to have master's degrees in a specialized economy in order to be effective in what the 21st century needs are. And so understanding one's archetypes, which you're going to do next week in testing, does not nullify your individuality. It just creates a category that our academic systems, our scholarly systems, our business systems can be mapped to, so that your individual strengths from a fixed pattern of thinking and behavior can be capitalized on, can be maintained, can be supported and encouraged by you and your relationships, and expanded upon with growth mindset through perseverance and grit to break those fixed patterns that no longer serve you. Took a lot of perseverance and grit for me to be mindful and understand that I needed to get a Ph.D. in psychology in order to be in a position to help other people learn what's needed for them to maximize their lives in the 21st century. Thanks again for your time. Good discussion.